What's up, man? How you doing? This is my first time checking your channel. I just, pretty opinionated. I like to defend leftist positions,
Hmm.
and I'm very skeptical of U.S. intent globally,
Okay.
and so it causes me to would be cautious with the narrative that the U.S. feeds the public. I'm pretty old. I remember our second Iraq invasion and how they, were like weapons of mass destruction. You know what I'm saying? Weapons of mass destruction. They're tossing babies on the ground, and they brought this young lady to testify to Congress, and she was like, "Oh yeah, they're tossing babies on the ground," and turns out she was like the daughter of like where was it? Like an international to a country. It was relevant. She was anti like her relations were wanting to take down Iraq anyways. But basically my point being is that you really
Wasn't the
have to be
testimony
skeptical.
about Kuwait, not Iraq?
Was it Kuwait? Yeah, she was lying to Congress, bro. So
Hmm.
and lying to Congress is really lying to the American people, right? And then she was promoted by, the Bush administration as this truth teller, right? And
Hmm.
and it's the narrative that they fed us. And so to me, it's very similar. The era that we're living in, the moment that we're living in, is that they often refer to it as the fog of war, in the sense that there's a lot of propaganda out there. There's a lot of truth, misinformation on both sides,
Hmm.
and so, um,
Do
I'm
you
still learning
think
about but
do you think the levels of disinformation on both sides are equal?
the levels are equal. Eh, it's hard to say, man, because I do follow US foreign policy pretty thoroughly. I'll go as far back as like, the Dulles brothers family, right? And how they, their grandfather, brought Hawaii, right? He was like their grandfather or their uncle was instrumental in overthrowing the Prince of Hawaii or the Queen of Hawaii.
Hmm.
Like they're when they were independent country, right? And we were like, hey, nice Pearl Harbor, we kind of would like to park aircraft carriers here, right? And so, in the late 1800s, the Dulles brothers, their grandfather or their uncle or whatever was, he was instrumental in overthrowing that
Okay, I'm just gonna.
you
Sorry,
know,
I don't want to cut you off too much, but like, okay,
but
we can probably agree that Western imperialism based on disinformation happens and is bad. All right. Um, if we're talking about the difference between disinformation from the West and the Kremlin, like state media on this issue, right? Like Western imperialism is bad, right? Okay, we know this is bad. Even when the Iraq war happened, there was dissent within the media. There were millions of people across Europe protesting against it.
really,
Western countries went against it. Um, I don't
I was here
think.
in the US, man. There wasn't a lot of pushback. Like literally, like people that would question the motives would get fired or canned off of like major networks. And so I see that now with like RT America getting shut down. Anyone that has a kind of a contradictory opinion is being shut out or canceled. And I get it, right? It's no one likes to see, human life, so, you know, mistreated or taken, right? And it's to me, I'm like, well, yes, it's wrong for Russia to be pushing into Western Ukraine, but then you have to take into consideration the pro-Russian, civilization in Eastern Ukraine, who are very pro-Russian, who are being brutalized by, it's basically was a civil war going on since like 2014 coup. And so, there's nuance to the whole situation. It's not just Russia bad. Let's arm, these Ukraine to the T and prolong this, And so I, I get it. It's tragic to me. It's tragic on both sides. I wish no Ukrainians would die. I wish no Russians would die.
So
And
you're against Russia going into, you said Western Ukraine. Is the fact that they've rolled
yeah,
into Eastern Ukraine okay to you?
to me, yeah, because they're like there's pro-Russian citizenry there, right? That's where after the coup of 2014, that's where a lot of the resistance was because there's a lot of pro-Russian Ukrainians that were upset with,
Yeah, okay, okay, but just quickly, like,
European Union. Go ahead.
okay, so there's lots. So, very recently in Scotland, right, there have been polls indicating that more Scottish people are in favor of Scottish independence than against. It goes up and down. Say it's like 55, 60% at some point.
Mhm.
And the consensus in Scotland is that after independence, we would become like more like Nordic aligned because, you know, we're like the welfare state and all that when they're kind of dismantling it down in England. Um, I don't think that would justify Nordic countries rolling tanks in here and like supporting like armed separatist movements, though, right?
I'm not familiar with the skirmishes or the conflicts there. I just
It's just that that's
I'm
what's
just
happening in Ukraine, right? Is that there are separatist movements, and at most, they've never accounted
Mhm.
for more than a third of the territory in Donbass and Luhansk. So
Right, right.
they don't
I think
actually have like like even whether or not they have like a very strong majority support. But if a part of a country has majority support for secession, that doesn't justify
yeah,
another country to go in and arm them and
right. Well,
recognize them as a state independently.
does does the country allow for secession? Like, because even in the United States, there we can there are methods to where like if we voted, like say Texans voted to secede from the
Mhm.
United States, I forget what the particulars are. Like literally states can secede from the United States, right? And if that was the case, if let's say Texas wanted to secede, and then other parts of the country were like that's bullshit and started shelling and bombing the fuck out of Texas,
No, they
and
can't do
let's
that. That's
give a
you're wrong.
hypothetical.
They can't do that. Like the Supreme Court rules like secession is unconstitutional. Yeah, they can't do that. They'd
Well,
have to
I
be
think that's
granted a referendum by the federal government.
well then I would disagree with that. I think the people of the territories, let's say if Texas wanted to secede, they wanted to do their own thing, or then they should be allowed to do it. Why should the people on the ground, the people of these communities, be forced to be part of something that they don't want to be a part of? It's just
Well,
like it sounds like authoritarian and like what
because
we're claiming
because you
Russia
could
is,
argue
but
that almost every ex-colonial country, which I will, you know, Ukraine is an ex-colony of the Soviet Union or an ex-extension of the Soviet Union. Every ex-colonial country had its borders drawn in a less than ideal way. You have like whether it's the Kashmir region or whether it's the uneven borders in Kenya that leave like groups with very very deep historical ties separated by a border. The problem is that secession historically and today it seems as we're finding out in Russia is inherently like a violent process unless it's granted through a referendum, and you need a pretty strong mandate to get that granted in the first place, and that mandate wasn't there. Like Russia just unilaterally gave it to them without and it wasn't recognized anywhere else in the world.
so
I'm still
what was
I
the
need to
vote
take you back to the
for Crimea?
disinformation thing
Like,
though. Sorry.
but okay. But I was
What
just wondering, like, what was the vote for Crimea? What
mhm.
their vote was to join Russia? Like, what the percentage was?
You mean the referendum that they had, the 95% one, right? That's what you're referring to?
95%. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
knew it was in the 90s. I didn't know exactly what it was. So,
Can you
do
tell me
you
when that
feel
referendum
the rest
happened?
of the
Can
world
you
should
tell me
force them?
can you tell
Do
me
you
when
think the rest of the world should force them to be part of Ukraine?
can you tell me when that referendum happened? Was it before
Uh,
what any events that happened before or after the referendum, for example?
after the peacekeeping force came in, probably after that. But regardless,
After Russia moved its troops into
right, but if
Crimea.
regardless of who was providing protection to Crimea, the ultimately it's what the will of the people wanted. If the will of the people, 95%, like you quoted, if 95% of the people wanted to be part of Russia, why don't we respect that?
It's very
Why
interesting.
do
Okay,
we respect no
because you
part of
don't.
that?
Okay, first of all, it's you don't have a referendum by like after an army rolls in there. Like that's not the common. That's not a very common way to have a referendum. Even like Catalonia, if they wanted to have a referendum, you could say they held it illegally, but they don't like get another army from a different country to roll in and then give them the referendum. That's the first issue. The second one is that
Mhm.
the polling very dramatically changed before and after the referendum. There was majority support, but it was more like closer to 60, and it was actually on the decline. 70% of
Mhm.
Crimeans wanted to break off in 2009. By 2011, it was down to
Okay,
65.
well,
And not
I'll
to
give you
mention,
that.
that's another question.
I'll give you
That's
that.
my first point. My
It
second
wasn't an
question
it
is,
wasn't an ideal it wasn't an ideal way to resolve the
well,
situation,
it's not
right?
that it's
But
not ideal. It's that it's like not a way to do it. It's just, it's not that it's not ideal. It's just that you don't have
so
referenda in that way.
so so kind of like how the United States has a third of Syria, right? That's not an ideal situation, right? There should be global condemnation, right, for the United States literally controlling a third of Syria, is specifically their oil fields and agriculture fields, right? You would adamantly condemn the United States, right?
Yeah.
After all this,
Yeah. I
after
don't know
this
why
crisis
this,
is
yeah.
resolved,
Yeah.
right? You'll be like, you'll have a stream saying, we condemn the United States. They should be sanctioned because they control a third of Syria, which doesn't belong to the United States. And then what was it, like Donald Trump gave like the Golan Heights to Israel, right? Like a unilateral decision, right? We should
Mhm.
condemn the United States for doing that. There should be heavy sanctions on Israel and the United States for doing these authoritarian things, right? After
Can I
after
ask
all
you a
this
very, I need to ask you a very
right?
simple, okay, every time
Mhm,
you bring up what the West does, okay, I'm just going to ask you the same
mhm.
question is, do you think the fact that, do you think there's an inconsistency with saying that the Americans shouldn't have done those things, especially, yeah, of course, Trump shouldn't have recognized like Jerusalem. Yeah, of course. Okay, I agree. You're the one who's being inconsistent when a larger power imposes its will on a smaller country, right? You're the one who's being inconsistent
No,
here on
no, I'm
unilateral
not.
decision
I'm not
making. You think it's
because
wrong when America did? You think it was wrong
these
for Trump to
land
recognize Jerusalem?
because those portions of Syria are not pro-Israel or pro the United States, right? We're talking about Crimea, like you said, had a 95% vote to separate from Ukraine and join Russia, right? Oh, but you said it dropped down to like
Wait, wait, wait,
70%.
wait. Jerusalem
That's
is
fine.
Jerusalem is 60% Jewish.
Okay.
So popular support, yeah, it's only 37 hour, yeah. So Jerusalem is like the popular opinion within Jerusalem would be to be part of Israel.
Okay.
But you think
That's
Trump
hey,
was, but you think Trump was a, I'd like to think as a leftist, you would say Trump was still wrong to recognize Jerusalem, right?
um
Have you changed
as
your mind all of a sudden?
the whole Jerusalem and Israel and Palestine conflict is interesting to me because I'm like you said, like I consider myself a leftist and very anti-imperialist. And so I'm like, I was talking to my roommates, like who initially has like historical, like indigenous claim to like the region, right? And I was trying, like people I talked to said you have to break it down to like the tribes of Israel or the tribes of, or like these initial tribes. I don't really follow religion very much, but ultimately it was a breakdown of like they're like, well, see, these tribes existed there and such and such had like a religious context, but ultimately what I've come to understand that it was like a hodgepodge, like that whole region didn't just have is Jewish people there. There was like there was well, not Muslims because they weren't there until like the 7th century, but it was just like a cultural cornucopia, right? It was a lot of different cultures and people. And so now now there's the discrepancy of like who has territorial claim, right? And so I'm not too familiar with the history, like the
Mhm.
really like that's like really long time ago. And so yeah, I
So
would say
if you're going to go to
but
indigenous claims and historical right, you have nothing when it comes to Crimea. You know why Crimea became a Russian majority region, right? You know what happened there? It wasn't always, not 100 years ago, was it a Russian majority. Do you know why it became a Russian majority?
Why Crimea? It was
Yeah.
during the Soviet Union, right?
Yeah, what
It
happened?
was that,
1940s, why?
huh?
Yeah, why? What happened?
Well, the expansion of the Soviet Union, right? Like, why is there Nazi ideology in
No,
Ukraine,
hey,
right?
don't, excuse me, are you dodging the question?
Right.
Why is
Okay.
Crimea, the region, the geography of the peninsula didn't change? Why did the Crimean Peninsula become majority Russian under the Soviet Union?
I'm not familiar with like I said, I don't. go that far back,
You
but
were
it's
willing to go
just
that far back for
just
Jerusalem, so I thought it'd be
it's
a
just
valuable
like
question.
colonialism, right? It's just colonialism the same. It's
Okay,
probably the answer.
okay, so if you don't know, it's fine. It's okay. It was in 1944, after Crimea was taken back from the Nazis, when Stalin forcibly deported 200,000 Muslim Tatars and sent them to Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan. I can't remember one or the other. Yeah, that's why Crimea is a Russian majority, and also the fact that, in typical Soviet fashion, they um, like banned writing in the Ukrainian literature, and even the eastern parts of Ukraine have a history of Russia moving Russian-speaking people into those regions so they can counterweight the influence of Ukrainian nationalism. So
I heard something though that like the like Ukraine like historically like you're talking about like long ago was part of the greater like Russian people like that it was like considered like mother are you or something like mother like it was considered part of Russia like a really long time ago.
so they were part of the Polish and Lithuanian. So they were part of the Polish Empire until 1654, and then under the Treaty of Pereyaslav, because the Ukrainian Cossacks were being persecuted by the Poles, they took protection from Russia, and in exchange for protection, that meant a lot of the Ukrainian Cossacks becoming part of Russian culture, and yeah, so it was like an exchange. But also, I mean, if we're gonna go back, the Kievan Rus people actually predates the entire existence of Russia as a so whatever. But I mean, that's like, I don't know how far back we need to go, but yeah, like
Yeah, exactly.
the
Yes,
reason,
I mean
well,
we can
it's
stay
just
with
that
the
the
relative
reason
present.
is, if the
Go ahead.
reason for the majority Russian population existing in eastern Ukraine is a direct result of not even that long ago Russian imperialism, then what's the idea that, like, just because there was imperialism in Crimea like 60 years ago, we need to do more imperialism now? Like
No,
what?
no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that, like in present day, right? Like if we value, the ethnic Russians that are in Eastern Ukraine and in Crimea, right? And
Mhm.
we don't want them to be abused or killed or slaughtered by fascist or nationalist forces, right? And so I think you conceded that, or not conceded, but you realize that there's been a civil war since the 2014 coup, right? And so Eastern
I
and
would
Western
also wouldn't
forces have
call it a coup,
been
but go
killing
on.
each other. Eastern and Western forces have been killing each other since 2014. A majority of the people that of life lost was that those people in Donbass, the people that are more pro-Russian, that are ethnically Russian. And so like you said, the numbers are, in the thousands, right? Tens that, almost 20,000 people have already died. And
Hmm.
so, and a majority of those from Eastern Ukraine. And
Right?
so is there, I mean, there was no global backlash to the loss of life in Donbass, right? They're like we're choosing, what lies we value and what lies we don't value, right? Because like I don't think even as of yet the casualties involved with our current situation has reached, the loss of life in Donbass at like 14 or 15,000. And let's not say all of them are in Donbass. We can say that maybe 70% or 60% of them are from Eastern Ukraine. But it's like, and I'm not saying, pick a side really, but let's recognize that this didn't just happen, a couple weeks ago, that there's been
So
conflict. People have been killing each other, and the majority of the people that were dying in Donbass, and the only people that stepped up were the Russian people. Like I don't agree with it. Like I said at the beginning, I don't agree with them continuing west. I think they should have that initial peacekeeping force would have been fine. Like, protect the pro-Russian, protect the ethnically Russian in Eastern Ukraine. That would have been fine by me. But the further encroachment upon the west of Ukraine is where yeah, that's definitely shouldn't have happened. You made your point by protecting those in the east. Whether or not, the west um wouldn't, were if they were continued to fight and were like bombing Russian troops at that point, I don't know. I'm not on the ground there. And so there's a lot of like I said, fog of war things that'll come out later on, video or documentation. But it's like I just feel like to put the blame completely on the Russian people and the Russian motives, that to like completely say that they have no justification is not quite truthful. There is some nuance, right? Like if there is like, can you imagine if China was bombing and just straight out, had like a nationalist government, and that was just systematically killing like people in, like, say, the Uyghurs or something like that, right? Like if they were just like, killing, tens of thousands of people, imagine the global outrage that would happen, right?
Well, there is global outrage. I don't know. Okay, I don't know why you keep drawing this analogy with. First of all, you're using very loaded language for someone who wants to consider both sides, right? The only people describing this as a peacekeeping force is the Russian
Hmm.
government. Okay, I'm not talking about Russian people. I'm talking about
Why is
the
that? Why
Kremlin,
is that?
and because it seems to be the case that the Kremlin, for like, I don't know, maybe like the last 10, 15 years, have been lying through their teeth about pretty much all of this. I don't know if you've been watching the RT have been
Does the
using like,
Kremlin?
sorry?
Do you know who the Dulles brothers are? Do you know who the Dulles brothers are?
No. Who? Can you spell
You don't
that?
know the Dulles? They're a pretty interesting family. Like I initially tried to get to you, is that
Okay,
their
okay, you
grandfather.
spoke for like 5 minutes, okay? Let me
Go
give
ahead,
me
go
a
ahead.
second, okay?
No, go ahead.
So you're talking about the okay, let's try and focus on one thing. So like the issue in Donbass and Luhansk. So why, if these were like if this was like disputed, and it seems to be the case that since like 1991 they've voted like east and west like back and forth since the fall of the Soviet Union, like Donbass and Luhansk has been split with like pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian candidates and all that. Why did the fighting only start after 2014 if they were always divided?
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again.
If Donbass and Luhansk were always divided, and if, according to you, the Russian-speaking people were being, I don't know, persecuted by Ukrainians or fascists or whatever, like, why did the fighting start in 2014?
There
They've
was a
always been
coup.
divided.
Yeah, they've always been divided. Yeah, electorally. Like if you look at like an electoral map, the Eastern Bloc is heavily pro-Russian, and then the Western Bloc was heavily like pro European Union, when it comes to like policy. And so I mean it's kind of like, it's
If it's so
any
heavily
political,
pro-Russian, then why
kind
have
of like
they
the United
only
States. Right?
if it's so heavily pro-Russian, then why 7 or 8 years after Russian recognition and after getting military support from Russia, have Donbass and Luhansk, like those separatist groups, haven't even been able to get like a third of the area? Why have they failed so hard? Like, if they have popular support, if that was what the people wanted.
Why haven't they militarily only controlled a third of the area?
Yeah, I mean they've had help from
So
Russia, they've
are you,
had recognition from Russia. Apparently, most of the people living there want it. Why?
you're talking militarily?
Yeah,
Militarily?
yeah.
It's well, the Western is heavily funded and supported by the European Union and the United States, right?
Like
Like what if the
before
United States
2022, where
what
they
if the
like,
United States and the European Union was funding the East bloc of Ukraine? Do you think there would be a difference
what
in
are they
result?
funding? Are they funding Ukraine? Were they funding Ukrainian fires in the same way that Russia was supporting the separatists?
But they're ethnically Russian in the Eastern. What business
Wait,
does the United
being
States have
ethnically
funding?
Russian doesn't mean you support the Russian like recognition of separatists, right? These are different things.
Yeah, I mean, if they're ethnically Russian and they have a pro-Russian stance, and they're being killed because of this, I do you
Wait.
you see a
They're
problem
not
with
being, are
Russia?
they being, they're not being killed because they have a pro-Russian stance. They're not being killed because they're ethnically Russian. The
You
killing is
do you
happening because
do you think
after
there's
the killing
Nazi?
is
Do
happening,
you think go ahead, go ahead,
we can talk all about
go
the
ahead,
Nazis after this. The killing
okay,
is
all right.
happening because after 2014 and after the removal of Yanukovych, Putin unilaterally recognized two separatist regions that couldn't even control a third of the region, and then sent military like force in to support them. That's why there's
Oh,
fighting. There's
he did
fighting
this in
from
2014.
there's fighting from Ukraine. Yes, there's fighting from Ukrainians who don't want like a part of Ukraine to be taken over by Russia, and there's also fighting by separatist groups, like armed separatist groups who are supported by Russia. Yeah. That's
Okay.
Putin
Well,
like
no,
fomenting a
I didn't
civil
realize
war
he
there, right?
recognized it. I didn't realize he recognized it way back then. I thought that was kind of a recent
Well, no, he
development where
didn't. He
he
didn't. So
recognized it.
he started supporting separatist groups in 2014. Yeah, he started
Oh,
like
so
offering military
he
aid.
didn't recognize their independence
No,
then, right?
that was
Okay, okay.
2022.
So I
Yeah.
was confused because I thought that just happened this year, and so like you're saying it happened a long time ago, but uh,
But you wanted to talk about Nazis, right?
yeah. So it's interesting to me, that I feel that is also a part of what's going on, right? Is that there's like the Nazi. I'm learning that the historical context of like the Nazi ideology, because of World War II, and the atrocities that happened, because of the Nazis, that their ideology kind of lingered within Ukraine, and that there are various far right, Nazi militia groups within Ukraine, and the United States. um Excuse me, I have an issue with my throat. But the
Hmm.
United States has a long history of working with kind of like either terrorists or far right groups, Nazi groups.
Hmm.
And I was trying to ask you about the Dulles brothers because they're instrumental in, one of the Dulles brothers was the head of the CIA in the 1950s, and he helped coordinate the overthrow of Mohammed Mossadegh in Iran during the early
This is
1950s.
irrelevant. We don't need to talk about this. Is completely
No,
irrelevant.
it's relevant because the CIA footprints are all over this, right? Like
Where the
Victoria
CIA?
Newland before the coup of 2014,
Hmm.
Victoria Newland, there's a leaked phone call where she was picking the next president, where she's
Wait.
like, "Oh, such and such, he's our guy. That's the guy we want."
Okay.
And then
Okay.
she's all
Okay.
fuck
Okay. One
you,
point. One
such and
point.
such is our
One
guy.
point. Stop. One point. One point.
Yeah.
Victoria Newland, the phone call. Okay. You've read that conversation, right? You've read the transcript, I assume.
Uh some of it, you if you want to refresh, if you want to pull it up and
Well,
go over
I
it.
think there would be a pretty high burden of proof if you said that she was picking the new leader of Ukraine.
She was saying somewhere along the lines like such and such is our guy, and he ended up being the next president of Ukraine.
Okay,
And
she
then
said
on
he's our
top of that,
guy.
she was
She
like,
said he's our
she's
guy.
all like, we need, yeah, she was like, yeah, but you don't think that's high, like out of all the people that are trying to take leadership, she's like, this dude's our guy. Have
What do you
him
mean all
call
the
such and such
people?
and such.
This guy was the
We need
leader
to,
of this guy was the leader of the opposition.
uh-huh.
He was the
And so,
leader of the opposition.
but she's working. But see, that's the thing, right? That's the CIA, the United States government. We often, in many cases, we work with opposition forces within other governments, right? Like for example, Bolivia. We and
Don't go. Okay,
Venezuela.
okay. Look, don't please. You keep on running away to other
Covertly with
points.
all these countries. But go ahead.
Yeah, you keep on moving. Okay, so Victoria Newland said, I think she basically expressed a preference for this guy who was leader of the opposition. Like he was going to be the guy. It's kind of like,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
I
wait.
honestly don't know the validity of that. I don't, like I'm not on the ground, so I don't know if like you say he was gonna be the guy, so I don't know how much
Well, yeah, he was the leader of the
involved.
opposition of the
Like
biggest party.
it doesn't look good when she's like, this is our guy, and then he ends up being the next dude. But I get it.
Do you
You're kind of
understand
implying
do you
that
know that what the
maybe he
concept
was the
of
next guy up.
do you know what the
Go ahead.
concept of conjecture is?
Explain it.
When you take two pieces of a story and then you fill in the blanks, or more than
Okay.
two. Yeah. So, for example,
Right.
if I said before the 2019 election in the United Kingdom, Donald Trump said that he likes Boris Johnson, he doesn't like Jeremy Corbyn, and then Boris Johnson became the prime minister. Now, those are all facts. Okay, we know that Trump preferred Boris, of course he did, and we know that Boris won. Conjecture would be if I said this is evidence of Trump orchestrating Boris Johnson's victory over Jeremy Corbyn. Would you agree with that?
Fair enough. Yeah,
Okay.
fair enough. No, I agree. I
So
mention it as
Victoria
kind of
Newland
like,
saying that she has a preference for the guy who is leader of the opposition of the largest party is proof
Mhm.
of nothing irregular.
Right. But and I was also furthering in that conversation, she's talking about like, oh, we need to make sure these pieces stick together, these pieces glue. So it's like, what is she talking about, right? Like, what pieces is she talking about? What pieces did the State Department put together that needs to stay glued together, right? Like it seems to me, that our government, the EU or the United States was actively putting pieces together, or you can also say putting a government together that would function with the United States, that would be hegemonically, advantageous to the United States, because that's the way we operate, right?
Well,
We
that's the
we
conjecture that they
want
were
to
putting the
be
government
the
together. They
well,
weren't putting the government together.
it's conjecture, like you say, but it's like if you learn who the Dulles brothers are, and you learn how that's the way my country operates, is that we covertly under we operate very covertly in many countries. We do things not overtly, right? We do, and so we work with other countries to
No, we
put
do
people
it
in place,
pretty.
put
We
leadership
you
in
do
place
it.
that are friendly to the
You
United States.
you do it pretty overtly. Like in the Chilean coup, like Kissinger said, we're going to do this because we don't want the country to turn communist. When it happened in Iran, they said we're doing this because we don't want them to turn to communism. Yeah, they're
Do
pretty
you
overt when
detect a
they do
pattern?
it.
Do you detect a pattern though?
Yes, because
If there's a pattern, right?
okay, but the problem is like the difference is I'm not like 8 years old, and I don't think every regime change that favors the U.S. has to be a coup that's
No, no,
orchestrated by
but
the U.S.
that's the thing, that there's like, you don't have to be conspiratorial about it, right? Because there's documents that leak out,
No,
right?
you do have to
Specifically,
be conspiratorial because you don't have to be conspiratorial with Iraq, you don't have to be conspiratorial with Iraq or Iran or Chile because
or
this was overly done.
Nicaragua or
Yeah,
Cuba
because we
or
have
fucking
okay,
Panama or
because we have
fucking
because we have because we have
Dominican Republic.
because we have proof of this, right? Because we have
Exactly.
declaration. We don't have proof that
And
the United States were
and so
orchestrating a
can you
coup in
see why
Ukraine.
my perspective is tainted by the covert history of my
It
own
doesn't have
country?
to be
It's like
tainted.
I
Do you think
realize
that the United
that.
States is the only country capable of imperialism?
No, I don't think they're the only country capable of imperialism, but it's like historically we act in like even the recent history like in that way. Do you think the United States went to war with Iraq because they had weapons of mass destruction, or because they were throwing babies out of incubators in Kuwait? Do you
You
think
were in
that's
chat talking to me about Ukraine, and you can't stop talking about things that I already agree with.
okay?
No fact about Iraq or Nicaragua or Iran like is going to like change my mind about what's happening in Ukraine. You need to
Yeah, I'm
convince me
not
of something
I'm
that's
yeah.
happening in Ukraine and Russia. So I could say,
No,
for example, that
yes.
Ukraine probably has a lot of reasons. The majority of the Ukrainians have a lot of reasons to want to face westward. The Eurasian customs deal was definitely not working for them. Their incomes were stagnant between like 1989 and 2013. Like they were not really moving. They'd already seen what happened in Georgia. They had already seen Russia use the port in Crimea to attack Georgia, even though a retaliation from Georgia would have meant hitting Ukraine. They saw what happened in Chechnya. Some of the pro Western Ukrainians, probably saw what happened in Chechnya, where gays were being thrown into concentration camps, as it may be a little bit too fashy for their liking. I want you to try and engage with just the topic, like the one topic of Russia and Ukraine. You don't need to remind me of things I already know about Iran and Nicaragua. Like,
No, I get it. No, I'm just trying to paint a historical context, because a lot of people, like you may agree with me, but a lot of people don't know these things about Iran, Nicaragua, and the imperialistic history of the United States and the CIA. You as a leftist, and a lot of leftists understand the historical arc, right?
mm,
We understand the United States imperial ambitions, throughout, since the advent of the CIA, but a lot
okay.
of other people don't. And so I'm out of habit. I'm in the pattern of explaining real briefly, what it is, so you get a good sense of the imperialistic ambitions of the United States. But you already recognize it, so I'm hearing that that's not something I need to bring up with you. But a lot of people don't understand
I
these
mean, if you
these
were
connections.
using this with if you were using this with someone who doesn't know about the imperialism, that's also kind of like a bit kind of like Weasley on your part as well, though, because you're using America's past to like prime people for a conclusion about Russia and Ukraine when it might not necessarily be the case. You would need to actually just, if it's that easy for you to demonstrate like American imperialism at work, then show it happening in Ukraine, because so far I haven't seen it. Victoria Nuland,
Well,
it's
see,
a
that's
red herring. There's nothing there that shows imperialist intentions.
see,
Like,
that's the thing about covert action, right?
well, if
They
it's
don't
covert,
like
then you can't prove
they
it. Then
don't
it's just
they don't
then it's
bring
just
yeah,
conspiracy.
exactly. How do you prove covert action? It's really hard. You only learn about this shit decades behind the fact.
So could I just say that Putin's actions are like with Crimea, and well, they're not covert; they're very overt what he's doing. So I can, it's actually easier for me
Yeah.
to lean into that. So you were
I
talking
do
about
want
Nazis, and then you went on
I
to
do
talk
want
about.
peace in the region. Oh yeah, we were talking about Nazis, and there's an amazing documentary that kind of you know opened my eyes to a lot of the historical context, and because I'm not very researched on the whole Ukraine and ethnic Russians dynamic, but it's like I'm not a fan of Nazis, right? And so if you have Nazis within your National Guard or your military, I think it's probably a good idea, to get rid of them. Here in the United States, we don't have like battalions of KKK,
Mhm.
proudly, having the cross or KKK like symbols all over their uniforms. It's probably not a good look. And but ultimately, me bringing them up is just to kind of hint at that there's probably conflict, right? Because of the Nazi presence against ethnic Russians, because the Nazis in the West probably don't consider, ethnic Russians as being Ukrainian, right? And so there could be, you have to keep it open that there's possibly some conflict, some possibly, escalated tension between the two sides because of this.
Well, first of all, I would be very impressed by those Nazis fighting for like what, two Jewish leaders in Ukraine right now. But anyway, yeah, there's a neo-Nazi presence in Ukraine. Yeah, I know that. It's I mean, I'd be interested to see how big you think it is in a second. Like, it's definitely not as big as, say, Greece, where
You should
neo-Nazis
watch
held.
you
Hang
should
on,
have
hang on,
watched
hang
Ukraine on
on,
Fire.
hang on. It's not as
Okay.
big as, say, Greece, where neo-Nazis were holding what, like 15-20% of the seats at one point. But no one said we should go and invade Greece to denazify them. Like, yeah, that's not really a
You
reasonable
know who
solution.
Stepan Stepan Banderas?
Yep. What about
You
him?
know, should he have monuments and statues in Ukraine? Uh,
That is that's a very contentious issue in Ukraine, because some see him as he was a Nazi, like whatever the word is, like collaborator, but he was also someone who some Ukrainians consider someone as like a someone who like tactically used the Nazis as a bastion against the Soviet Union, and who incidentally, because the Nazis like found out his real position, they put him he died in a concentration camp, in a Nazi concentration camp.
so you consider him a hero or no?
I don't think he's a hero. No, no more than I consider. I don't know, like David Lloyd George. They have statues of him in England, and he describes Hitler as the greatest German of the age. He was an ex-British prime
Yeah.
minister during the First World War. We had a fucking pro-Nazi king in England who has statues to him, like, and Edward the Eighth. So
Ultimately, I do want peace in the region. I would like, whatever pro-Russian forces in the east to be left alone, and whatever European Union forces in the west to be left alone. Obviously, Poon's gone AWOL with it. I would have preferred him just to protect those in the east. But what's happened. Hopefully there's a peaceful conclusion. And at the end, and but ultimately, and I'll be waiting for you to vehemently condemn our presence in Syria and advocate for the release of Syrian land back to the Syrian people once all this is said and done. Hey, no, I appreciate you talking to me though.
sure.
We've been going back and forth for quite a while, and I don't see, whatever side you're on, if I think we all consider ourselves leftists, and I think that, us on the left, we have a tendency, we have like really big hearts, right? And our hearts ache whenever we see tragedy and loss of life, right? And then so it causes us to be, emotionally charged on this issue, and to be able to have a back and forth and discuss, factual facts on the ground, and keep it civil, but understand that ultimately we want a peaceful resolution to it all. I personally don't want harm on the west or on the east, and I think a lot of times, we call the people in the East, oh, they're separatists, they're Russian mercenaries or whatever the case may be, but they're people. Ultimately, in the end, they're people too. And if we have to protect the people in the East as well, I think it's upon us to realize, there's two sides to a war, right? There's innocence on both sides, right? And we have to be cognizant and aware of what's going on through the fog of war, right? And realize, that there's innocent lives on both sides,
I mean, there's innocence on both sides when the Nazis like fucking were sweeping over all of Europe. Okay, yeah, okay, what? Like,
well, no,
it's not
you
really.
make a good point there. You make a good point there, right? Yeah. But what side are the Nazis on right now, right? So, but
Well, wait,
anyways,
the Nazi. Okay, wait. So first of all, like there are Nazis on the Russian side as well. There are people who like Lukashenko who
yeah,
said
but they're not,
who had
they're
positive
not
words about
within
Hitler.
the Ukrainian military and getting elected
Lukashenko,
into
the head of
involved.
Belarus, Lukashenko saying that like positive things about Hitler.
He got removed. Got
Alexander
removed from
Dugin.
his position, bro. He's got removed. This guy, are you talking about the Wagner Group? The head of the Wagner Group?
I'm talking about the president of Belarus.
Oh, the president of Belarus. Oh, I'm sorry. No. I mean, just I I get it. Belarus and there's Nazis everywhere, but it's like there's a documentary called Ukraine on
You don't need
Fire,
to do a
right? It's
documentary. Can you
really
tell me? Okay, I
Ukraine
need
on
to
Fire.
just, I need to.
It goes into the detail of like how there's far right groups that that were instrumental in this coup, that neo Nazis that were instrumental in this coup and everything that took place, and how the United States could have potentially been involved. And it's nuanced, right? I don't know if we're going to agree, because I'm more conspiratorial. I'm against my own government. We work covertly almost everywhere, and so but ultimately, you want peace, I want peace, everyone should be protected, and ultimately, hopefully this all gets resolved, pretty soon.
You know that the Nazi Party in Ukraine, in 2014, they got 4.7% of the popular vote. By 2019, it went down to 2.15.
What's that saying? There's this saying here in the United States. There's like a group called the 3%, and it's
Uh,
called 3% because it only takes 3% of the population to overthrow a country, a government.
is that what
And
the
so, yes,
I'm sorry, is that what you think the neo-Nazis in Ukraine are doing?
no, I'm just saying it's just you're trying to diminish the influence by saying, oh, it's only a certain percentage of
Well,
the
yeah,
of the
it's about as
population.
high as the British Nazi Party had in like 2010. Yeah, it's pretty low, and especially when you're comparing it to,
But
I
we
don't know.
don't
Do
have
you think
Nazis.
do you
Do you
like
think the
if,
Russia has Nazis within their like whole battalions that have like large groups of Nazis? I mean,
I mean, are we going to split
ultimately to
hairs here?
me,
I know that.
ultimately to me, the number one country who lost the most during World War II to Nazis was the Russian people. They lost like four times as many people as the Jews, who were literally executed. The Russians lost like 25 to 27 million people, right? And the Jews lost like 8 to 10 million people. All tragic, right? But you
Mm.
have to admit that the Russian people, above any other country, is super sensitive to fucking the presence of Nazis, bro. They lost more than anyone in the world to Nazis. So for us to be example, I live in the US, right? So 3,000 people died, 3,000 people died in 9/11. We went to war with Afghanistan for 20 years. We spent trillions and trillions of dollars,
You're
and then
dancing off
at the
again.
end of it,
You're
and
running
at the
away.
end of it, and at
You're
the end of
flinging
it,
yourself
and
off
at
into the
the end of it,
distance.
we told them, do
You don't
not
need
have
to.
anyone on your country.
Can you please just
Go ahead.
focus on one? Okay, again, okay. Russia has this very popular thing where like they like to distinguish themselves from Nazis because they consider themselves the ones who defeated the Nazis. That doesn't change the fact that they're
They lost them all.
that doesn't change the fact that they have military textbooks being written by Alexander Dugin, who was the main founder of the National Bolshevik Party. That doesn't change the
Ukrainians
fact
have Stepan Bandera,
that doesn't
but
Stepan Bandera does not have the same level of significance as Alexander Dugin. Are you kidding me? Is Stepan
what
Bandera
about
writing
Arty
military
Yard,
textbooks for Ukraine? What the
the
fuck are you trying to do?
foundation
Are you
Arty
trying to
Yard?
equate like Bandera with Dugin right now? Dugin's alive right now,
Mm.
and he's like an instrumental part of the Russian like system. Are you kidding? Like, and not to mention that. Okay, let's say that Russians are not like Nazis. What are we going to split hairs over like anti-Semitism in Russia right now. I'm pretty sure anti-Semitic attitudes in Russia are more prevalent, according to polls, than they are in Ukraine. I'm pretty sure that like it was still like the people who are used to fight in Chechnya, who were putting gays in concentration camps, are currently fighting in Ukraine now. I'm pretty sure it's the case that Putin was the one who said that trans people were like their existence was a crime against humanity. I mean, okay, they're
I'm
not
not a
Nazis.
fan
Well,
of
what's the
Putin. I'm
difference
not
at
a
this
fan. I'm
point?
not
You
a
know?
cheerleader for Putin. I don't care about Putin. What I do care about is the Russian people not to be demonized, unjustifiably. I know the Russian people, have the most loss to the Nazi ideology than any people in the world. And so I'm gonna grant them that, and I'm gonna hear what they have to say and what they feel threatened by, and so I acknowledge that the conflict in Donbass is something that has been going on since 2014, that there's been losses on both sides, but from my understanding, a majority of it are pro-Russian forces in the east. And I'm like I said, I wish there was peace there. I wish the West wasn't killing people in the east, and now I wish that Putin wasn't pushing further west. I wish
You wish Putin
everyone.
wasn't arbitrarily recognizing two separatist states and arming
Well,
their
I mean, but
militias?
why? But why? But I wish that the West wasn't killing people in the East first and foremost. Like it's
Well, no, not
basically.
first and foremost. It happened because Putin was supporting militia groups
So
that were
you're
separatists.
justifying the killing of people in the East? What are you trying? What
This
do
is a
you, because
conflict.
Putin
If Putin is
recognized?
if Putin is supporting militias and supporting them militarily, then yeah, of course there's going to
He's
be
supporting the
fighting. This is
people in the East.
conflict.
He's supporting the people in the East to not be persecuted or killed
Are they
or
being
harassed
when were
by
they
the
being
people in the West.
persecuted? How are they being
By
persecuted?
the West. You just admitted that there's been conflict since 2014. What are you talking
Conflict,
about?
conflict that is
Right.
instigated
Like war,
when
civil war. Okay.
Putin was supporting separatist groups. That's when the conflict
Well,
started.
if these people don't want to be part of Ukraine, what's the problem with that?
Okay, if a group of people don't want to be part, and a smaller minority of them are willing to take up arms and fight for like an arbitrary, like unilateral breakaway, then no, I don't think the country next door should fund that group. No,
Okay,
run
then
for
why the
office.
fuck are
Use
we
your
funding
popular
Ukraine then?
support.
Why are we funding Ukraine? Why are we sending it? By your logic, then we shouldn't be
We're
helping
funding
Ukraine at
Ukraine
all.
because Ukraine's being invaded.
Well, the people in the East don't want to be part of Ukraine, so
They're not being
why
okay.
why can't Russia help them
Okay.
not be part of Ukraine then?
First of all, you are overstating like the popularity, first of all, of like the breakaway in these two
Come
regions.
on.
That's why the separatists have failed to hold the entire area. And second of all, there are lots of groups in
14,000
different
people have
areas.
died already, bro. 14,000 people have already died. What are you talking about? Like
I've
if you have to make the claim that these people don't want to be separate from Ukraine, but yet you killed 14,000 of them, that's not a really good argument.
it
Like
wasn't 14 okay. Do
these
you think
people don't want
every
to be part of Ukraine, and to prove that we're going to kill a lot of them, and so. But no, no, I agree with you. Not all of it was, Eastern Ukraine, but it's on record that a majority of it is people from Eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, and and you can even grant that a majority of them want to break away. Okay, I'm pretty sure if you look at polling on like secession in the United States, like some states poll quite high, and even depending on what time of the year it is or what's happening, yeah, secession is quite popular in like a lot of parts of America. I don't think that justifies arming them to break away by force. Would you?
Um, well, initially they had a peacekeeping force, right? They just moved in there to keep peace.
Who do they? Okay,
So,
they call it a peacekeeping force. Come on, you've seen
right,
what they've
right,
been
right.
doing,
Well, I
right?
mean, that it is
They're
what it is.
blowing up
Off,
hospitals
off,
and shit.
off
They're not
topic
fucking
though.
peacekeeping force.
Off topic though. Are you in London? Are you in Britain?
Scotland, yeah.
In Scotland? Okay. What's your opinion on Puerto Rico? Like there's like 4 million people there.
Hmm.
They're not a state of the United States.
Yeah.
They're considered Americans, but like just basically like American territory. Like do you feel Puerto Rico should either be cut loose from the United States or granted statehood? I'm curious what your opinion is.
Um, I, I mean, I don't know
There's
enough
4,
about
4
it,
million
but
people there.
I don't know enough about it. But I know that the concept of them getting statehood makes right wingers mad. So why not?
Yeah, yeah. I
I
agree
don't.
with you.
Yeah,
I think they should have statehood. I
I
mean,
think
they
that's what
voted
they.
for it
Yeah,
already
they voted for it.
a
Okay,
couple
yeah.
times. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, like that's the
All right,
thing
man.
is like just because a majority wants to break away, that doesn't like the point in like the reason you don't fund separatists and support them because of that reason is because this is what happens. It's because people fight because it's unconstitutional. You're breaking like a state's laws and it's not recognized by the rest of the world, and that's why you get conflict. But that's what Putin
Well,
wanted.
I
So
mean,
like,
if it's not recognized by the rest of the world, that's not up to the rest of the world to decide what, the sovereignty, of a people, right? Like these, if this group of people, this large group of people want to be, either independent or part of Russia, then it's up to them to decide. And then you shouldn't kill 14,000 of those people to make a
you're
point
doing
or
the
try
thing
to
again. You're saying that all the
quantify.
14,000 deaths were
I know,
people who
I know,
wanted to
I know,
break
I know.
away.
I was being sensational about it, but no, but it's nuanced though. You have to admit this whole it's not straightforward. Well, to me, it's not as straightforward. Knowing the bit that I know about, like again back to the covert intent on my country's side, but it's interesting, right? Because there's a lot of hypocrisy in my country, right? Like the example of Syria, Puerto Rico. I mean, it's just like a fucking, island, in the Atlantic in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're not a state. They have no, they can't break away. They're just like in limbo. But yet,
Hmm.
we're keeping them that way, and it's strange. It's a strange dynamic, a strange period that we're in. I'm I'm just, wanting peace on both sides, right? Like at first, like everyone else, I'm like, oh, this is bullshit, right? Russia, they're building tanks on the border, not researching anymore. You're like, oh man, that's complete bullshit, right? And then, you do a little research into it, then you realize there's a coup in 2014, and they've been fighting
Well,
ever
whether or
since,
not
right?
it was a coup is pretty disputed as well, right?
Oh, really? It's
Yeah,
disputed if it was a
that's
coup.
a legal dispute within Ukraine
Does the
because
United States have
Yanukovych.
a habit of cooing countries? Would you
That
would
doesn't
you
that's completely irrelevant. That doesn't mean that.
is it though?
Yeah, because you completely you tried this. You completely failed to
No.
demonstrate United States
Really,
involvement
really?
in what
The
happened.
historical my country's
Yeah,
done
what?
so
Just
many
oh yeah.
goddamn
Oh, I'm
coups,
so
bro.
okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, just because
Don't get
America's
me
done
fucked.
coups around the world, that means that every single coup that
Oh, like,
happens
dude,
on
it's
the
like
planet is done
30
by
or 40
America.
coups that we've done,
Yeah,
like,
and that
since
actually means
the CIA.
henceforth till the end of time, every coup that happens is done by the CIA. Yeah,
Well,
that's what we're
yeah,
going
yeah,
by,
you
right?
can't. But see,
Default.
that's the thing, right? Because
Even if
it's
we don't have the
covert
proof,
action, right?
even if we don't have the proof, because it's
It's
covert.
done
Yeah.
covertly, right? So it's not taught. It's not taught in American history books,
So
right?
you are
It's not taught in
you
history
are
books anywhere,
justifying.
right?
So yeah, you're
It's only
justifying.
you only you. It's only recognized within conspiratorial circles, right? Because it's
No, it's not.
it's
It's actually not. You don't need to be a conspiracist to recognize what happened in Iran. You
they
do
teach
need to
they
be.
teach
That's the
they teach you guys
difference.
about the Dulles brothers in Scotland. They teach you guys about the Dulles
Well, they
brothers
taught us about
because
the
I
Iranian.
could have sworn you said no, you didn't.
They
You don't
taught us.
know who they are.
They taught us about the Ukrainian coup. We were taught about Nicaragua, not the Ukraine, Iranian. We were taught about
Mhm.
Nicaragua. Well, yeah, we were taught about these things. We were taught that it was deliberately
What was that
orchestrated
gentleman
and
in
supported.
Africa who was assassinated?
Who?
Fuck, the
Allende.
gentleman. Yes, 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 yeah.
See, we were
And
taught
so it's
this.
like we
Yeah.
do, we do this all the fucking time,
The
bro. It's
difference is
it's
the
not a
difference is
surprise to me that
the
it
difference
it
is we
wouldn't be a
provide
surprise to me if
evidence.
we had our footprints in this one. And that, yeah, you're right. I have no like concrete evidence
Okay.
as of yet, but it's hard to get, right? Because this is covert action, right? This is done through WikiLeaks kind of shit, right? And oh, shout out to Edward Snowden, the fucking hero. Um
I mean, WikiLeaks didn't expose what happened in Chile. That was the Kissinger admitted it at the time,
yeah, I'm just saying that
so it wasn't
the
covert.
kind of the kind of covert stuff that happens is not, our media doesn't talk about, our covert intent or our CIA operations, right? That's all covert action. And it's like you for someone like me, you have to take that into consideration, right? Like
Did your
is United States covertly working behind the scenes to assassinate people or to work with, right-wing groups or military groups, what is the United States role, right? And it's it's that's always in the back of my mind because we do this so often, and it bothers me. It bothers me, and that, I'm not trying to be dismissive of the point. I want, like I said, I want peace. I don't want Ukrainians to die. I don't want Russians to die. I don't want Eastern Ukrainians to die. I don't want
okay?
Western Ukrainians to
I'm
die.
gonna cut you off again because you kekeep on repeating the same
But
like proselytizing. So yeah, again, like you can talk about you can feel like skeptical about what the United States does and everything and all that. That's fine. Like I am as well, okay? And that's why I tried really hard to look into the context of why Russia was doing what it was doing. And like I don't know why it's such a difficult pill to swallow that Russia is like an imperialist power. And then we can look at if we want to have your Turkey and
Sorry.
if you've got your Syria and your Iraq and your Kuwait and all that, well then you've also got Russia's actions in Georgia. You've got Russia in 2003 trying to take over an island that's part of Crimea. I don't suppose any of your sources told you that Russia had plans to annex Crimea as early as 2010. That this was very well understood at the time, right? Did you know that?
No,
Before
I
there
had
was
no idea.
Okay,
Yeah, no, I had.
exactly, right? So I just feel like I don't know, you're doing this like leftist brain thing, which like is just like there it has to be America's fault. It can't be the case that
Well,
there are
I'm a
other
bit jaded,
imperialist
man.
powers that are just as
I'll
capable.
admit I'm a bit jaded, right? Because the United States acts in in nefarious ways a lot of times, right? And I'm Mexican American, and so I have a lot of sympathy for what goes on in Latin America, right? And so when the United States funds a coup in, let's say, Bolivia, right, or has, like various attempts to coup a lot of countries in Latin America, right? And they work with right-wing forces, right? I try to research and learn, what these activities are, and a lot of it is contributed to
This
the legacy of the
fight.
Dulles brothers. They would be an interesting read for you to learn a bit about them. But again, and so these countries that end up getting cooed by the United States, right, and sanctioned, right, like say Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia for a little bit.
Hmm.
Who are the only allies, right, that comes to the rescue of these Latin American countries when they're being economically strangled by the United States? It's countries like Russia, it's countries like China, right? All these other countries, they come to the aid, they provide food, they provide medicine. Russia was providing COVID vaccines to various countries in Latin America. It wasn't the United States. The United States won't even drop, vaccine patents so that the rest of the world can get vaccines at
Hmm.
a cheap rate. No, it's capitalism number one, right? Like Biden always says, I am a fucking capitalist. And so it's I feel I'm jaded, right? I'm jaded by the cruelty of the United States and how they have been towards Latin America. And then the more you read in history, you realize it's not just Latin America, it's the entire world. We act unilaterally in so many areas, and we do it with irregard of any punishment upon ourselves because we are a very powerful country. And
Okay.
so, but I get it, right? On the face of it, you know this is very tragic. We wish we didn't come, that this situation didn't come about.
I'll cut you off again
But
because that's
I
another
don't want.
repetition. But yeah, I got your point. So like I actually kind of like what you just said because you actually just very adequately, I think, described exactly how a Ukrainian would feel about Russia. Because you can go back to like the 1700s where Ukrainians have been persecuted systematically by Russians, right? Well, by the Russian state. Whether it was like them banning Russian, like Ukrainian literature in the 1800s, whether or not it was like the 1920s where they temporarily recognized Ukrainian independence, then annexed it again. Then there's the Holodomor, and then in the 1930s, where 4 million Ukrainians were like systematically starved by Russian policy. And then you could say, even in recent history, when they watch the brutality, the flattening of Grozny in Chechnya by Russian imperialists, when they see what happened in Georgia, when they see what's been happening in Crimea since like for the last 100 years, they when you see like the actions of the Soviet Union in 1956 in Hungary or 68 in Prague, like yeah, you're just like I don't know why. Like you're actually just like I don't know why you find it so difficult to accept that everything that America does, like other countries can like Russia and China can do as well, if not worse. Like okay, even like American media is
I would
not.
disagree.
Let me
We're
get
number one in this issue, bro.
let
We're
me give you
number
an
one.
example. Let me give you an example. American media's got its problems. It's got very big problems. We don't have like American state media where the president can dictate the output of like broadcasters, right? We don't have American state media putting out video game footage and passing it off as war footage, right? We don't have that. We don't have American state media saying that George Soros orchestrated the 2004 color revolution in Ukraine. They do have that in Russia. We don't have an equivalent of that.
So that's interesting that you mentioned George Soros, because isn't he on record saying that like he's directly funding like a certain media outlet in Ukraine, and I forget what his exact words were. Um, but it's interesting, right? Because I don't trust a lot of the extremely rich like Soros. I don't trust Soros. I don't trust the Koch brothers. I don't trust the Bush family. Let's
Do you see what
see.
you
There's
just did
just
there? Is like,
I don't
can
trust
you
Bill
please
Gates.
just one equivalent? Of I need one equivalent of like Russian state media using video game footage and passing it off as war footage. I need you to give me like I need you to just acknowledge that what Russia does with its media is worse, okay? That they're more dishonest. Maybe Trump was like close to
What?
like Kremlin
What?
style propaganda.
Media is more dishonest? You think RT America is more dishonest than, let's say, CNN or Fox News?
On this war, yes.
Hmm,
100%. Oh yeah.
interesting. Okay.
And by the way, George Soros like buying shares in like media companies is very different from him orchestrating a
You don't think he
revolution.
has influence? You don't think he has influence?
I think his influence is incredibly overstated. I think saying that he orchestrated the 2004 color revolution, no,
No,
absolutely not.
honestly, I actually don't know
And he doesn't have the same
anything
influence as the Russian
about,
oligarchs, right?
about.
George Soros doesn't influence American policy in the same way that the oligarchs influence Russia. No.
There's oligarchs everywhere, but like I don't know too much about Soros. But I know the little that I know. I'm not, the little that I'm learning is not leaving me with a good impression of it. But it's like a lot of rich people do that, right? Like I said, the Koch brothers.
The
You
Koch
have
brothers don't have the same level as influence as the Russian oligarchs. The oligarchs are like, they sit next to Putin and they say what they want, and Putin does it unilaterally. That's it. Like, there's no like manufacturing consent. They just do it.
I think I think this has been like commonly stated. I don't have the stats offhand, but basically here in the United States, right, where when it comes to like things that the overall populace, like the overall amount of Americans, like let's say has a majority positive opinion, we want something to pass, we want something to become law, right? And
Mhm.
it's like it gets like if we a majority of people here want something to become law, it only becomes law like 30% of the time, right? But if the extremely wealthy here in the United States, if they want something to become law, it's like way much more, like 60% of the time, something like that becomes law.
Yeah.
So it's
But
it's
typically, they
and
need popular support.
ultimately as a leftist, we have to understand that it's wealthy people, regardless of where they are, they have an over, you know, inflated power. It's and it comes from their wealth, right? Because they can fund to get these politicians into leadership roles. And so it doesn't matter if it's Russia or England or the United States. Money has the ability to manipulate politics, and that's common
Okay.
sense,
Do
bro.
you see why every
And
time I try to
to demonize rich people in Russia is kind of, I don't know. I don't know what the relationships are with Putin, but it's not unique, right? Look at the Bush family. They come from oil, right?
No, it's
Koch
pretty. It's
brothers,
it's still
fucking
unique. Like Bush, at
Trump.
the end of everything, Bush. You understand the concept of manufacturing consent, right? That even if the rich
Yeah,
want to do something, they have to to some degree sell it to the public, right? To some
yeah, they have the
degree, they
money
need
to
to
do
win
it.
elections, and they need
They
to,
have the money to do it.
yeah, which they don't need to do in Russia. That's what I don't know why I keep telling you an example of like why Russia does what America does, but worse. Like with oligarchy, the oligarchy in Russia is more powerful than any
I think it's because
billionaires
you're in
in America,
Scotland. I think
and
it's
you
because
just
you're in Scotland, right?
and you can't do it. Like I don't know why you can't accept that there's like a problem that's worse somewhere else. I don't know why that's so difficult for
I
you.
think I think it's because you're in Scotland. Because I'm
It's not because
here.
I'm in
I'm like I said.
Scotland.
I'm not because I'm Latin American. I'm Latin American, and all the local regional examples, right? Is all of imperialism is all perpetrated by the United States, right? Like for example, there's a lawyer named Steven Donziger, right? And he sued Chevron, who acquired, I believe, Texaco
Mhm.
because they dumped like billions of gallons of chemicals in the country of Ecuador, right? Just wrecking that country. People are getting cancer left and right. Children are dying, right? And and so this lawyer was like, "This is not right." So he represents the indigenous people of Ecuador, and he sues Chevron, and he wins a $10 billion lawsuit. And what happens is the United States throw him on house arrest for 2 years. He loses his legal license, and now I believe he got a 6 month sentence, right? But this is an example of how I'm a little jaded, right? Because I only see imperialistic activity within my region of orbit, right? Because I focus more
Uh-huh.
on it, right? Just like more European activities is probably more your specialty, and so I'm jaded, right? So because I'm like, man, the United States, they act in such fucking capitalistic interests, right? They're just always fucking harping on getting hegemonic control of these countries and extracting resources for the profit of the wealthy. And so I look at the conflict in Russia, and I kind of stand back and try to not quickly rush to judgment and just say, oh, Russia's wrong here, right? And so I'm trying to see both sides, and and which leads me to my position. I'm kind of slow to realize, I guess, the historical context, because you're telling me that in that region, Russia's more of the imperialist aggressor, even though, like I just see United States as being the most aggressive, right? Like I gave you the example of Syria. We currently, as of right now, control a third of Syria, and we started handing out fucking parts of Syria to Israel. I think Turkey, northern Syria's portions of it is going to Turkey, and there's no moral outrage from anyone in the media or the global. No one's saying, "Hey, let's sanction the fuck out of the United States." They can't do that. The Syrian people don't want them
There is
there.
quite,
Respect
okay,
their sovereignty.
first of all, there are sanctions against the United States for what it does around the world. It's just that they obviously don't have the same power, but they do exist. It's actually very common for people to criticize what America does in Syria. And I don't suppose the fact that Russia also has presence in these countries. Russia sends private mercenaries over to Syria. They also have they had a mercenary presence in Libya at the same time that we were in there.
So do you think the United States should
Before
give?
you go off, you actually just like admitted something like very like interesting to me, is that you said that you focus on this because you're from America, right? And that's why like you know more about the bad things America's done. That's why you're more primed to see America as worse. So you're more primed to see the anti-American perspective. Well, what you're doing then is you're doing what American conservatives do. You're doing American exceptionalism. You're acting as if America is uniquely capable of brutal imperialist action, or is uniquely capable of trying to influence regime change, or is uniquely capable of influencing coups. It's not. And sometimes I think like you're the one putting America on a pedestal here by acting as if it has this kind of like
With this
unique position on the
pedestal of
world stage
brutality.
that, sorry?
I said a pedestal of brutality, right? No,
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you
but no,
exactly. You are doing that. Yeah. Whilst like Russia was
but
throwing gay people
but
into
this
concentration camps in Chechnya, whilst they were pushing like
I
towards
don't agree with
Ukraine in the
yeah,
early
I
2000s,
don't
like
agree with that.
whilst they have a
We have
neo-Nazi
Guantanamo
writing their
Bay.
military textbooks. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we have Guantanamo Bay. We
Mm.
do atrocious things here all the time. And my point being is like, yeah, you're right. I do have a jaded view of my own country. And a lot of times when I see the economic brutality that my country perpetrates on a lot of Latin American countries, the only countries that come to the rescue to be some sort of economic salvation to those countries are countries like Russia, are countries like China, other countries that have been under the boot of American imperialism. They coalesce and work together to try to pull through it, right? Otherwise, they may have been toppled. They may have been, had these hegemonic forces forced upon them. And so that's why, I have a hard time, not stepping back and taking my time trying to analyze what's going on, is because a lot of times, like, Latin America is helped by the like Russia or China or other, like I said, other country, or Iran or whatever the case may be. And it's never been the United States. The United States is all like, we still have brutal sanctions on Venezuela, and it's like, what the fuck? Cuba's been under blockade for like fucking like going on what 70 years, and they pose absolutely no threat to the United States. And it's like for and I'm supposed to be like, you know, some like whitewashing the intent of the United States, or I'm supposed to be like, oh, the United States is only a force for good in the world, and we I know you understand this, but you get I'm really jaded. I'm really jaded. So it's like
I think
ultimately, go ahead.
the second biggest killers of civilians in Syria were Russians after the Syrian government was the Russian state. When it comes, okay, so when
So does that
America
mean the
was
United States should control a third of Syria?
sorry, yeah, again, you keep on moving it over to America, yeah, but yeah,
I just don't understand why the fuck we're there. I don't know why we have control of
yeah,
the oil
I don't
over
understand why Russia's there either. Who knows? Anyway,
because
I have a very
ethnic
simple question for you, right? If when America was sending troops into Europe in the Second World War to fight the Nazis, and someone in America was sitting there, well, I don't know, like we do eugenics here. Is it really like, would you really stand for that, or would you not think, okay, maybe America is right to be doing this, to be moving troops into Europe, and like even though it resulted in them having a very big hegemonic control over Europe afterwards, but like
say it again. I'm sorry. It was
when America was
pretty.
sending, like, when America was sending troops into Europe in the Second World War, you could have made the argument back then that America was just asserting its position as a hegemonic power because they got hegemony over Europe after that, or that eugenics was older in America than it was in Germany and all that. So, like, would you have really made those arguments though, or was like America not doing the right thing to go into to Europe in the Second World War?
To stop genocide against the Jewish people, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
no,
of
no, no,
course.
no, not to stop genocide. They didn't know about the genocide at the time.
The United States and during World War II didn't know about the genocide?
No, not until afterwards. The camps weren't discovered until after
Oh
Germany
shit.
fell.
Honestly, that's yeah, I didn't yeah, I'm
So they
not
didn't know that.
a historian, but I didn't realize that they didn't realize there was death camps within Germany at the time or elsewhere.
No, they didn't know
But
about the camps until they got
The
there.
Russians know. I mean, that says a lot about the United States intel back then, right? That they didn't even know that was going on.
Well, no one knew.
But the Russians knew though, right?
No, they didn't know until they got there first. But they didn't know. They didn't know before they got there either. No one knew. They were
Nobody
in
knew.
contact with each other. Russia, like Stalin was like the one begging Roosevelt to send troops over, to fight them on both fronts. So
Yeah,
yeah, but like I feel
that's
like at
interesting.
the time,
No,
at the time, like when America did that, like would you have really been like making a fuss about like, oh, I don't know, we do eugenics as well, and because we knew about that, and like we do
no.
imperialism as well. Like, no, it's
See,
sometimes
that's the thing, right? It's
Sometimes
like
America is on the
I'm
right side. Okay, sometimes it happens, and it happened in World War II. It's happening now with Ukraine.
Oh, I see your point. Okay. All right. No, well, the Ukraine issue, I respect the sovereignty, right? As someone, on the left, I want to respect, a country's sovereignty, but then again, you're like, if there's ethnic cleansing of like Eastern Ukrainians, and it's like at what point, I
It's
mean,
not an ethnic
let's say
cleansing.
ethnic killing of people in Eastern
It's
Ukraine,
not an ethnic
at
killing.
what point there's the
I'm sorry, I can't let you.
so this whole civil war doesn't
Despite.
exist going on in Ukraine since 2014. It's just non-existent.
It's a fight. It's not ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing
You
would
don't think
assume
the
that
Nazis you don't think the Nazis' presence in the Ukraine military has anything to do with it? It's just coincidence that they're killing,
how many Nazis are there in the Ukrainian military? Take a guess. Just like I know the number,
are,
but you can tell me.
are you familiar with the Azov Battalion
Yep. How many soldiers are in the Azov Battalion?
in the right sector?
How many soldiers are in the Azov Battalion? They're the biggest one, right? So how many?
And C-14. I heard that they were actually the smallest one. Nah, I
For
could be
Nazi
wrong.
presence, they're the biggest. How many soldiers in the Azov Battalion?
I don't know how many.
2,500. Do you know what percentage of them are estimated
How
to be
many? How
Nazis?
many?
Two and a half
How many?
thousand. What percentage of them are
Two,
Nazis,
two and
though?
2,500 in the Ukrainian military?
In the Azov Battalion, yeah. That's 20. That's 2,500 soldiers. How many of them? What percentage roughly are Nazis?
I think I heard like 20%. So it's like
At
what, 200
most,
something?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, they're not the only neo-Nazi regiment, though, right? In the military, there's like C-14. I heard C-14's a neo-Nazi group within Ukraine. I heard the Right Sector, which was heavily involved in the 2014 coup, is also in Ukraine. There's other groups as well.
Well, the Azov is the
And
biggest
so it's
one.
like their presence there doesn't leave a good impression on me. And I'm sorry, if you have to have a Nazi presence within your military ranks to be effective, then there's not you're not going to get kudos from me. So,
Well, we're less. It's
and
like less than 1% of the military, and again, like the Russian military, like
what's the Nazi presence in the United States military?
Russian military
It's not.
textbooks are being written by
Isn't
the
it like
founder of the
0% or
Nazbol
something?
party. Like Russian military textbooks are being written by the founder of the National Bolshevik Party. So yeah.
Regardless,
No, not
should
regardless. The government that's
should
supporting the separatist groups in Russia is linked to Nazism as well.
so does that mean they deserve to die in Eastern Ukraine? They deserve to die for
I could
having
pose the exact same question to
pro
you with the Azov
pro.
Battalion. Oh, so now
I'm sorry.
now it's do they deserve to die? Okay, like okay, whatever.
No, I'm just saying, like, dude. So why, if they, it ultimately goes back to, right, like, where are their loyalties, right? If Eastern Ukraine doesn't want to be part of, or Donbass doesn't want to be part of Ukraine, then I think we should respect that and let them live in peace. But if there's far right faction in Ukraine that was making that difficult, then someone felt like they had to stand up for those people, and it just so happened to
Yeah,
be
it's almost
Russia.
as if
Like historic.
they'd be much better off having like a democratic or a constitutional like process rather than getting Russia to send troops in there. Yeah, definitely. I
I'll be with you.
agree.
I'll be with you. I'll agree with you. I think that should have happened, but now, I mean, now they're protected, and as hopefully, there's a quick solution, but is as of yet, Russia's got their back, and no far right Nazi groups are gonna fuck with them. So
Out of interest, their Pew Research actually did do a poll in Ukraine and Russia on anti-Semitic attitudes. Um, can you guess which country had a less favorable view of Jews in their country?
his go ahead.
Russia, 18% to
Okay.
11.
Is I wouldn't is Nazism solely anti-Semitic, or is it other
It
ethnic
has
groups?
quite a lot to do with anti-Semitism. Yeah,
No, right, but it's
it's a
not
pretty
in its
strong
entirety
indicator.
just Jewish, right? It's not just Jewish groups. Granted, I love my Jewish brothers and sisters, but it's not just the Jewish people.
Okay, my friend. Do you have any final words before we go?
No, man. Peace and love. Let's hope for a quick resolution. No killing Eastern Ukrainians, no killing Western Ukrainians. Is ultimately the final resolve that I would like to see. But it's yeah, it is what it is right now, and I don't know how long it's gonna take, but no, I appreciate you listening to me and having a conversation. I think it's weird though, right? Because you would consider yourself a leftist. I consider myself a leftist. Um, More so, I don't know. I go down more of a conspiratorial route, because of my CIA knowledge, right, and how the Dulles brothers in that faction. But I think peace. We both agree on peace. Should be the resolution, I guess.
Sure, we
All
can
right, thanks,
also
man.
agree that imperialism is very bad. All right, but yeah, take care, my friend.
Yeah, yeah. Later, man.
All right, bye bye. Interesting conversation. At least he was honest about the CIA thing. Holy shit.